Happy Tuesday.
Jeremy.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Hope you had a good summer.
I did indeed. How about you?
Yeah, it's been nice. Uh, it's been mostly here, but still nice.
All right, well, there aren't many people connected, but it's 3 minutes past, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to the August 26th SIG Multicluster meeting. And I think, Arthur, you've got the first scrub topics and the first main topic.
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing changed much there, so I'm just like putting this out so that we can have review. Although I reckon that Stephen, you approved many of those. Well, many of those, 2 or 3, I think. So thanks you very much for that. There's just like, for instance, you didn't approve the
Yeah, the kept one for
tenants.
the
Yeah.
service export.
This is fine.
Yeah.
And there is the IP family ones, but last time we said that we needed Mike to also approve, and he's not there, so we'll wait for him. He would probably look at the note at some point. And while you were away, I made some proposal about having some form of cluster selector. Well, I don't think I would like reread everything here, but well, we can do it at some point, I don't know. But feel free to take a look. It's not supposed to be something in the short term, like not blocking the beta v1 promotion, and something that we can do in like really medium long term. And probably we would need to also talk to the gateway API people and the SIG network people also.
Yeah, thanks. I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, next topic is also me. I don't know if there is also anything else in the scope before we do that.
Well, I went through the scrub and didn't see anything. Well, there's stuff still waiting for a review, but people are away. I didn't see anything to highlight other than the ones that you've mentioned already. So let's move on to the MCS API
Okay.
and CRD.
Yeah. So I think when you were away, we had some feedback from some of the gateway API people, and it seems to be like we agree on this is a good idea, not necessarily the label name and nitpick and all of that. Although the main question that we wanted to wait for you is, do we want to make this as part of the release, or is it something like independent and we bump the version each time? Because I guess it's mainly you that will actually do the release. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's safer to bump it whenever there's a breaking change, or maybe we can say bump it whenever there's a breaking change since the last release, because it's easier to remember that the change is breaking when it's being worked on than later on when whoever does the release and has to go back and see if there's any breaking change that requires changing the.
Just
the
FYI,
version.
there is I don't want to be this like bumped only on breaking change, like every time basically, because
Right, any change, yeah.
Yeah. So you would be in favor of like starting from 0.1.0, and each time there is a PR updating this, we manage the version independently of the Git tag, basically. That's what you are saying?
Yeah, and if it's bumping for every change, then it might as well just be a single counter.
Yeah, technically yes, but yeah,
because I don't think there's any semantic information that's carried by having a triplet. Or do we want to distinguish things that are actually breaking compared to just a change?
Well, I mean, a counter sounds okay. I don't think it's just like super hard to like import the sendver Go packages and have some logic around that. And maybe it would turns out to be useful later. Because I guess if we choose a counter, we can't really go back on that.
Yeah, that's true. Unless we do a 0-point counter. Yeah. Yeah, maybe. And does Gateway API use a triplet?
Yeah, they have bundle schema something.
Yeah, bundle version B130. Yeah, okay, so let's follow that then.
Okay, I would just update the. Yeah, they also start with a V. I can start with a V too. I'm not too.
Yeah, that makes it clear that it's a version. And I'm curious what you meant by, so in the agenda you said adding CRD schema version to MCS API CRD to facilitate Go install.
Yeah, Go install mean by a Golang program. Was this the confusion?
Oh, okay, right. I thought it was a reference specifically to the Go install.
Yeah, no. Okay. Go program installing the CRD. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I will update that. Then maybe those we want to have a comment about how it should be named, please go ahead so that we can just choose the name, and then I guess it's okay.
All right. So the next topic is supporting additional endpoint query formats.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I added this topic because I put a PR and was guided this is our best place that we can discuss about it. I can explain. It's a currently like a multi-cluster service. We all have this service namespace SVC cluster set.local, this format. So thinking that if a service want to be migrate to use multi-cluster DNS, they can just change their domain to the cluster set.local. But I found it's just in our case of adopting the multi-cluster DNS, I found that the service need to change the whole endpoint record because the currently cluster ID is put in the endpoint.cluster_id.service.namespace. And it's fully possible if we put the cluster ID in the end, it's like also like a domain suffix. So I made a change to see if we want to put it in the multi-cluster plugin. Also maybe put it in there like a KPE. This is for this format.
Yeah, I'm the one that answered you in the PR. I think it's, I mean, it looks good. I don't know if we want to choose to make this into the cap or maybe say it could be optional and have a config. But I mean, I guess it could be by default too. I don't know if other people have points against it, but yeah, I don't.
How other people think. I'm also reading to her. So I can also can I share screen if people don't mind?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this is the RFC, which is here the definition is interesting. Is it said maybe addressed individually using this format. So if we want to change, we can see here there is an additional format is just the host name SVC ins .svc and cluster ID .cluster set.local. So if we want to make it just publicly show to everyone that is somewhere we can change, and then change the multi-class Coordinates multi-cluster plugin, and that will be applicable to all the use cases, and it's also backward compatible.
Yeah, so just to clarify for other, you want all, well, as you remove the shell, but you want the cluster ID to be also additional between the service and the cluster set local, right?
Yeah. So why this is made easier is also so originally looks like this cluster ID is just be added into the middle. I'm not sure the reason we add into like a specific format. I think it's just maybe like defined originally, but see if a service like for using a multi cluster DNS service, they can just simply change their domain. And because in our case, the domains are much more easier to change. We can change in their like pod DNS configuration, and in some many applications, they can allow you just to change their domain because this domain thing is everything you can define yourself. And similar in this case, if we put the cluster ID in here, rather than this will be consistent with the existing Kubernetes pod addressing, then just change their domain, then it's a consistent onboarding experience for a service to use multi-cluster DNS. Is there anyone?
Right. Yeah. I think I get what you're. So this is still only for headless services, right?
So this is a headless service. Will let me see headless. So this is for the endpoint, like stateful set. Stateful
Yeah.
set, yeah, will have the host name and have this like a cluster ID, which is it will be directly addressing to one pod IP.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just actually there is no change. I already tested in my locally. I'm just thinking if we merge to the upstream in the future, I don't need to build that binary myself. So just moving this everything function keeps the same. Just this format to put the cluster ID like in here. Additional format and keeps the also keeps the previous format because the people might already use that.
Yeah. So I suspect we didn't really think there'd be scenarios, configuration scenarios where you'd have the same host name in different clusters.
Yeah, because this is just pointing to one pod IP, so we have to put the cluster ID because if we're from multiple cluster, we don't know which pod we are pointing to.
Yeah, I understand exactly what it's used for, but it's just the moving the cluster ID to the back.
Yeah, I see people raise hand.
Yeah, Jeremy.
Well, since the proposal is not to stop it, it's additional, right? Like we wouldn't be breaking anything that's already there. Does this, I worry about encoding additional names as required. Like an implementation can always add additional ways to address things. I think like we don't set any constraints on that. But the more like if we add it as a requirement, then that means that absolutely everything needs to be able to support that, right? So like requiring multiple addressable names seems interesting.
It's for requiring. I think it's like people can choose which which like format they want to use. Like if they just want to use because their ES is just a one name mapping to an IP. The IPs are stay the same. They can choose if they already using that, they can just use. And for like maybe users like meet the same case like me, want to have some easier migration, just changing their domain name, they can just use the one. Puts the
Oh,
ID.
so you're saying it would be one or the other?
Yeah, just a two.
But then we lose portability in implementations, right? Like if we're if it's one or the other, then I'd almost rather just not have either, right? Because then you can't rely on the spec.
Can't rely on it. You mean like you prefer just having one record?
Yeah, because I mean everything in the spec is like as a consumer of the spec, I don't have to care about the implementation because I know that the spec has been implemented and I can just assume that things will show up as the spec says. If things that are optional in the spec, then I can't. If it's optional, then I can't count on it, and then I actually need to build my consumer to focus on the specific implementation because now I'm really consuming implementation specific behavior. So we lose the decoupling of the consumer and the producer. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to think why like people can't rely on it. Like both way, they are like a solid way we want to address into a pod IP, which is they achieve their function and it's reliable because from the implementation, both way will work. Or the existing test keeps unchanged. just add a new test also work. That's from the implementation level. So
but you're saying the implementation chooses one or the other to implement, right?
They support both format. They can parse in the when implement the multi-cluster plugin. I mean now it's be put into Kubernetes. Just when that implementation, they can parse in both way, because they can either try to pass it from after the SVC, or they can just keep the original path format.
So I think what Jeremy's trying to get at is that if we add this to the spec, for it to be useful, then on the implementation side, it can't be optional. So that means that if we add this to the spec, all current implementations suddenly become non-compliant, and they have to implement support for this. And because otherwise, if an implementation can choose which one to support, then somebody trying to use a multi-cluster service has to know which form their implementation uses. And then they can't easily change multi-cluster providers. They might run into issues where they're trying to deploy on one cloud provider that uses one way and another cloud provider that uses another, and their applications will suddenly stop working. So for it to be useful, I agree with you on the user side. If this is supported on the user side, then the user can choose and it's fine. But that means that on the implementation side, if it's to be useful, we have to force all the implementers to support this.
So one thing is the implementers is first is this format is a support in the both format will be support in CoordinS. Is that like everyone get the same idea with me? Or some
just FYI, the CoordinS plugin, well, the function is now part of the main CoordinS, but it's not used by everyone. For instance, Stephen here works on Submariner, and he has its own CoordinS plugin. And I guess GKE has its own thing. Yeah, so there is multiple implementation of DNS out there.
So once like this implementation, currently when our change, we don't change, it's fully backward compatible, means we don't change any existing. We just add additional addressing form of a possibility. Like they can have a new record can be addressing to the pod. So in that way, this is in implementation side, we support both, and the customer, they can just choose either way, will get their wanted IP. So that is everything from the CoordinS side. If you're talking about the other implementation is about MCS API, like the cluster, service import, service export, that does not matter.
No, but they have their own DNS implementation that understand service imports. Like it's both things.
The service import is always just because only CoordinS will pass that service import, read that service import. Service import is be created by some like either controller or like some implementation operator controller side, right?
No, but I get that. It's just that the code you are editing is not used by all the implementation. It's just not, well, all the MCS API implementation. Submariner does not use this code. I'm guessing GKU does not too. In Cilium we do, but it's not everyone does that.
Yeah, I know Cilium cluster mesh, but Cilium cluster mesh can, they also use CoordinS multi-cluster, right? As long as they use CoordinS multi-cluster, they can resolve this format. They don't need to controller side.
Yeah, but I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but the caveat is if we add this to the KEP as official thing, for instance, in Submariner, they would have to edit their own like CoordinS plugin to add this part or this behavior in their code. You will not add it for them because they have their own thing.
That
makes sense.
Yeah, just a discussion here, because I'm trying to think why they need to add anything. They don't need, they can't just keep everything they have. So there's a reason for you think like Cilium need to add it. The reason is why they need to add it.
No, but like Cilium is using the thing that you made a PR to, but
Yeah.
Submariner does not, and probably GK does not too. So they need to do something on their end to be kept conformant once you will edit the cap, if that makes sense.
So you mean like they don't want to just keep this existing. They have to update to the newer one. Is that your point? I mean that you can't just keep their existing unchanged and everything functional will still perform well.
Yeah. But it's just a matter of conformance. Like if people will need to update their thing outside of your just PR on like the coordinates repo. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Like if this is useful and we want to make it there, and I mean other people agree, probably should be in the cap and people should like make their implementation conformant to your change. But I mean, it's just a point.
Okay. Is there any other opinion? So the summary is like we don't want this change because there need the end user to also like a change in their side. Like we are not allowing them to just keep their existing. Am I summary correct?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is that it would require that the end user actually has in-depth knowledge of the current implementation, and so that it loses portability in the spec.
No, but wait, you disagree that there is a or in the cap. You don't disagree there is an end. Like if it's conformant, it should support both formats at the same time. Or am I misunderstanding?
Right. Like if we're gonna have multiple formats in the spec, then everything needs to implement both.
Yeah.
Because the end user should only need to look at the spec to consume any conformant implementation.
Yeah, I have the same opinion basically.
Okay, then that's fine. Then I will just keep our own forked version for this. Thanks, everyone.
But we are saying that it can be part of the cap, I think. No?
But it sounds like the issue it's that supporting the other format is not is the problem for this implementation. It's because having two formats that are supported everywhere doesn't solve any problems, right? Because then everybody like I don't think generally we should have two formats that must be supported everywhere, because it doesn't seem like it's for the benefit of the end user. It seems like it's for the benefit of the implementation. So the implementation would have to do just as much heavy lifting to support both formats as to support the one problematic format. And so from what I'm hearing is that the current format is too difficult to support for the implementation.
But she said that it was for like the user, not the implementation actually. Like to have an easier time like switching, I guess, between cluster local and MCS API. Something like that.
Yeah. Like if for people like onboarding migration, thinking about that, they need to change all their DNS format in their code. That is definitely harder than just changing their domain.
Okay. Sorry, I did not follow that part properly. Okay. I mean, we could add it to the spec. I think we should get more feedback, because two seems tricky, but I don't think it's fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, I just explain well, one side because I heard many mention like other consumers need to implement because I'm not fully get what implement they are going to do because this format parsing is done by CoreDNS multicluster. I just call it plugin multicluster.
That's the thing. That's the thing, though. It's done by the CoreDNS plugin in projects that use the CoreDNS plugin, but quite a lot of projects don't use the CoreDNS plugin, and so they would have to provide their own implementation.
If they just consume the new version, like it's just
no, but they don't use the CoreDNS plugin, so they can't consume a new version.
Oh, they don't use CoreDNS plugin.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Then that's I don't know. I would taking like all existing probably using the CoreDNS plugin. Just wonder, is there any example like for implementation they don't use CoreDNS plugin, but like something else? I just
Yeah, well, so that's what Arthur was saying. Submariner doesn't use the CoreDNS plugin, so that's an open source project you can have a look at. But I suspect that GKE doesn't. Probably AKS and so on don't either.
Well, EKS they created the plugin originally, so maybe they're.
Oh, EKS, yeah. But
oh yeah. Oh, AKS, yes. Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, so it's the sort of so when the sort of thing comes up, usually what we try to do is gather feedback from implementers to see whether they'd be okay with the change. We've done that for other changes in the past. So maybe you could try doing that, or so typically that would be that if you write up a PR on the KEP to add this change, which shouldn't be too difficult, then you can ping other projects to see if they're okay with it.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, can gather feedback. I mean, either way, it doesn't matter if like people have some blockers. We just do that by ourselves. So for other people to ping, do you have any pointers that I can I should like gather feedback from them or?
I think we might just use the scrub, no? To be honest.
Yeah, we could do that. Because in theory, the implementers show up in this call fairly regularly. Yeah.
So I just have a question. So does it? So if it's not necessarily in the spec or not at this point in time, does that preclude it from being put merged into the multicluster DNS core DNS repo? I mean, it could be in there, but just not in the general spec. And that would be up to Arthur, the folks that maintain that. But I'm just.
I mean, maybe as opt-in, but I would still prefer that it's in the KEP because I mean, well, it's quite recent that it was merged in CoreDNS, but I guess we could count that as the standard implementation, kind of, because it's the CoreDNS repo. So I would assume that it's strictly does strictly what the KEP says.
But it's probably not a violation of the spec if the multicluster core DNS did implement that other format. It still implements the spec format. I guess that's.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just not sure if we should do additional thing than what the KEP says basically there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just bringing that up as an extra point. I mean, it'd be up to the folks that maintain that to make that decision, but that could be separate from the spec. Updating the spec, we may want to still update the spec, but
also like as a separate point, if we consider the CoreDNS implementation to be the standard one, even if it's not in the KEP, it might force you guys like at Submariner to update it at some point because you will have pressure from users says, hey, the standard implementation supports it, why you do not? Something like that.
That could happen, but that's fine. If that as it comes, but
yeah, but then instead of like forcing your hand, maybe it should be in the cap and people should agree to it, and then
yeah, I'm not saying it
should
shouldn't
be
be in the
forced
cap.
this way. Yeah.
I mean, I would be fine to look at that, and as Steven said, we have the implementers look at this and see if we want to add it to the cap. I'm fine with that. Considering it for the cap. I was just saying to help Jingming, now she might, if it helps her to have it in the core DNS plugin, multi-cluster core DNS plugin. Now, I mean, because it can take a long time to get it into the cap. She's already pushed the PR. So for the multi-cluster core DNS plugin, so.
Well, if I may, it's in the wrong repo, but I guess the
well, whatever. Yeah, okay.
the correct
PR
is
okay.
probably won't probably take long, I guess. But yeah, I would probably try to at least make it in the cap first, and maybe then if there is pushback on it, but people still agree somehow that it can be in the core DNS, like not opt-in, like just by default. Maybe we could do that, but I'm not sure if we want.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I got a lot of information here. I think first I can read the PR in the cap and see just how people discuss about that. And yeah, after that we can see maybe also after a few weeks I can be back, see if people have some like a new thinking there. But yeah, thanks everyone. Like a really helpful discussion.
All right, thank you. So the next topic is Shane, who's back to ask us about the AI Gateway Working Group.
I'm here to bug everybody again. Yeah, so we're kind of getting to wrapping up the PR finally. Took a little longer than we thought. And basically, if you see the PR, you'll see that Steven and I were kind of the steering committee was asking for some final information, like for instance, if SIG MC wants to sponsor. So it sounded like maybe we'd have a decision today. So I just wanted to check in and see where people were at. Any remaining questions or anything like that? Or if anybody's not been part of the saga so far, maybe we can give them a kind of a little bit of a primer.
Yeah, well, just so everybody knows what it's about, can you just give a quick summary and also what it means for what the options are? Well, what it means for the SIG to.
Yeah, we can go back over it again. That's cool. So AI Gateway Working Group is very networking focused. It's not only networking focused. There's security and obviously multi-cluster and other aspects, maybe even storage. And at any point, a SIG can kind of jump in later and sponsor. And we might get that with storage. We're still talking with them, might get that with security, but it seems like multi-cluster is a pretty big use case. So AI Gateway in our definition, and we use the term with some pain because we don't really like the term AI Gateway, but that is the one that has kind of naturally come out, is basically everything. We're including everything that's basically above the service level. So if you're familiar with the Gateway API inference extension, it's effectively an alternative for service. That handles routing decisions based on model serving metrics and capabilities that are being advertised out of a model serving backend. That is actually more cleanly in the WG serving territory, even though it is networking focused. And we mentioned that in the charter, that's kind of a gray area. But everything above the service, so HTTP route, gateway, etc., is basically in scope. And we have a specific list you'll see in the charter and the PR of features that were like kind of like, these are the features we were thinking about that inspired the working group. Some of them are like semantic routing, semantic caching, etc. But there's also use, in addition to features, there are major use cases. You could use any of these things in a model serving kind of situation where you're model serving on your cluster and you have some other workload that needs to do inference. That's legit. But there's also the use case that we think is actually more important right now. Not that they're not both important, but it's a little more important, is what we call the egress use case, which is where you're not doing inference with some model serving that you're hosting, but in fact you're going potentially out of the cluster ultimately to something like OpenAI or Chat, Claude and all that kind of stuff, or another cluster, and that's where multi-cluster comes in. We have this really strong. We anticipate that it's going to be fairly common for clusters to be dedicated for inference, for reasons of keeping, because you have to buy specialty hardware for them. So that's one of the reasons, but also things like data regionality and stuff like that might lend to a topology where there's an inference cluster. We think that's probably fairly likely. We see that in some of our customers today. So that is driving part of the multi-cluster story, where we believe it will be fairly common for people who are doing model serving to have a dedicated inference cluster, maybe in different geographic locations, stuff like that, and have other clusters that need to do inference with that. So the egress use case that we're talking about in the PR in the charter it can be effectively synonymous with a multi-cluster use case, and we'd like multi-cluster to join in to, at the very least, provide some guidance on how you want to see that evolve. But at the most, any particular goals that you might think would be good to put in the charter here, or scope that is multi-cluster oriented that you think would be good to add to the charter if you want to get involved at a deeper level. So I think where this could go from here is basically, if the SIG wants to sponsor, it can be anything from we sponsor and we add that multi-cluster is in scope in the charter, and the working group can keep in touch with SIG MC. Hopefully somebody from SIG MC is able to come and join to kind of like navigate any of the multi-cluster topics that come up. Or it could go even further depending on your desires. If you wanted to take it to the level of like, actually, we have some very specific multi-cluster scope and goals that we would like to include in this working group. We'd be open to adding that. So that's kind of where we're at today. If you want to join it, good. You can join it later. But it would be helpful, I think, to get that kind of groundwork going, because I think multi-cluster is going to be a big topic.
Well, not everyone at once, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think one of the proposed things about work and selectors was also hunting for capacity. I think, I'm not sure if it was in this SIG that it was discussed, but say, for example, you need some accelerators and it's not available in some region. You might have it available in some other cluster. And then through a combination of, say, traffic management and resource availability, you could steer your workload or your scale up if you have a peak load or for some reason. And it would make sense that the spec for multi-cluster, but also for networking, for serving, is aware that if you have a multi-cluster service, or in this case, a multi-cluster serving thing, yeah, it makes total sense. But I think that would be from the perspective of the workload, not necessarily from the perspective of egress traffic. I suppose it would be east-west traffic if it's multi-cluster traffic, but depends on the implementation, of course.
Yeah, that's depending on the implementation. So we put the egress use case in air quotes because it's not decided yet.
Yeah, I think must have been a couple of weeks ago, we made a somewhat joke about AI gateways essentially being L7 gateways, because they are mostly aware of the contents instead of just doing some basic HTTP routing.
They are doing body-based routing, and it is it's for me, it's a very scary thing, and I'm not comfortable with it, but it is how it is going.
Yeah. Essentially, it's middleware as infrastructure, which is not necessarily something that in the past we would have chosen. But I'm also aware of use cases in my own organization where this is how we do it, because it's the least worst trade-off. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I've mostly just been following the meeting since last KubeCon EU, but from everything I've heard and everything I've read, I think it makes total sense. But that's
Cool,
just an
thank you
opinion
for
of a
the feedback.
visitor.
Appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I feel pretty much the same as well. Jeremy's AFK for a few minutes, but while we wait for him, does anybody else have an opinion on the topic, or is anybody on the call particularly interested in this and would be interested in joining the working group calls? Apparently not.
Looks
So I
like
guess
there's
that would.
not enough people in the meeting today.
Yeah,
Maybe the
probably
APAC
not.
meeting
Yeah.
has a higher success rate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, like sponsoring and just being like, we will keep you in touch is, I think, a level at which sponsoring works. So if you're, it sounds like the opinion may be, yeah, sounds good, but nobody's really ready to go join the working group yet. You know, that can develop further later if you want. I don't think sponsoring the working group and us basically reaching out to you in the SIG, I think, is a reasonable setup. I don't know if there's really any. If you look at how working groups are supposed to work, I mean, I think that is basically how they're supposed to work. So that would be fine. And we can, if you then later are like, actually, no, we do have some major thing that we want to add or something like that, or there's this use case or this thing we want to cover, I think that's reasonable. You'll see other working groups, even some of the recent AI ones, which there have been 3 of, that kind of have left the, you know, we can always update this later kind of door open. So.
Yeah. I'm planning to the extent that capacity allows, keep an eye on discussions in both of those, but yeah, I also don't have a formal role in this thing. I just happen to have attended for a while. So yeah. Happy to try to be a bridge to the extent that it makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So same for me. I'm particularly interested in, well, I don't really have any specific multi-cluster use cases in mind, but I think there's a lot going on in, well, a lot in the sort of AI gateway space in general, where stuff that's going on in SIG-MC is important. For example, cluster profile. The discussion is going on in GIE around generalizing import exports, all that sort of thing as well. So I know GIE isn't the AI gateway, but
There will be connective tissue.
There'll be connections, yeah. But it's yeah. So I think it's important for us to keep up to speed with what's going on in the working group, so that we can help the community in general avoid duplicating efforts. And so if we can get changes to KEPs and so on, maybe to support stuff that's needed, why not?
Yeah, that's my biggest concern here, is just trying to kind of head off potential like significant divergence, or like acknowledge that, hey, this is happening and this is okay for like the direction that we're trying to go with something. So like basically just make sure that we have kind of open communication around that kind of stuff. Because yeah, I think that there's certainly a risk that if we want to like pipeline everything that AI Gateway is doing around multi-cluster through SIG-MC, that could potentially slow down things to an extent that like makes it difficult to accomplish some of the goals of the AI Gateway working group. So yeah, I want to kind of be cognizant of the potential challenges there, but just make sure that we're like actively communicating between the groups about what's happening.
Yep. to your first point there, that is the baseline. We need to at least be actively communicating because it seems like multi-cluster will be relevant. And then that's in short, in lieu of any further scope or goals that you decide you may want to bring to it. To the second point, though, the second point being more about like not wanting everything to be pipelined through SIG-MC. As a working group, we won't own anything. I know some working groups kind of do, but we're trying very hard to remain a working group in the kind of the classic sense and have a clear exit criteria. So it is potentially pretty likely that we would be bringing proposals to SIG-MC if they are strongly multi-cluster relevant. Actually, I can't see us not doing that. To put more fine a point on it, I can't see us not bringing some level of proposal to SIG-MC, since we know that multi-cluster is a thing, including like the egress use case, which could also be east-west, which we have to navigate, and then when you have multiple clusters with inference sources that you want in different points, all these kinds of things. So.
Makes a lot of sense because the concept of work, the concept of a multi-cluster service, they are of course fully dependent on how the technology is actually used. So if a service or multi-cluster serving endpoint, or if that's a different entity, needs to have some work done, it would be fairly difficult to have a multi-cluster implementation of something that has not been taken into account. So yeah, I think the reverse, where the working group brings in the proposals, considering the amount of people that have the capacity to work on it, it's probably the best route. Because I do know that there's always, well, at least from my perspective, a reasonably healthy amount of participants. But it's not that many to the point where there is enough capacity to go and hunt for more work, put it that way.
Roger that.
Also, just as it comes to mind, the nice thing about, say, the work and the cluster sets, or let me put it in a different way, the definitions and the specs that are currently being discussed, they are generic or broad enough that this type of work would easily fall within its existing scope, because it's essentially a flavor of what's already being worked on. It does, of course, need the actual work to integrate it as part of a spec, but it wouldn't require some major, let's say, R&D to make it compatible. So yeah, I think that it is actually a great fit.
Long pause.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so assuming Jeremy's not going to make it back, I'll ping him. And like I said in the PR, I get an answer tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
And with that, we've reached the end of the agenda. So thanks everybody for participating, and I'll see you all next week.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
There's actually one item that I want to bring up. So
yeah, go for it.
I think on the placement decision cap, unfortunately, I think Jeremy is AFK, but we would like Jeremy to take a look at some of our responses for myself, Josh, as well as Ryan. Yeah, but that's okay. I'll bring it up next week.
Yeah, I'll remind him as well. In the meantime.
Thank you.
Okay, and for those of you who joined the APAC call, I'll see you on Thursday. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.